At 3:20 on the morning of June 8, 1944, Captain Theodore Hartwell, 29 years old, 0 confirmed kills, 0 days of frontline combat experience, crouched in a Normandy hedgerow 4 miles south of Sainte-Mère-Église, holding a Hohner Marine Band harmonica in his left hand and a compass in his right. 340 men from his battalion were scattered across 8 square miles of German-occupied farmland. In 48 hours, the scattered paratroopers had lost 62 men to German patrols. His battalion commander had called the harmonica a security risk. The operations officers called it a suicide device. Every field manual, every doctrine, every training exercise said musical instruments were forbidden in combat zones. They were all wrong. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions had jumped into Normandy darkness at 1:15 on June 6. High winds, cloud cover, anti-aircraft fire that scattered the formations across 50 miles of French countryside. Hartwell's C-47 transport took evasive action over Drop Zone C. The green light came on 3 miles north of the planned release point. 18 men jumped into darkness. They landed in hedgerow country, ancient Norman farmland divided by earthen walls 8 feet high, topped with vegetation so thick a man could stand 3 feet away and remain invisible. By dawn on June 6, the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment had accounted for 38% of its personnel. 1,400 men scattered, radio equipment smashed in, communication wire spools lost in drops. Officers separated from standard assembly procedure called for cricket clickers. Small metal devices that made a double click sound. 1 click for challenge, 2 clicks for response. The army had distributed 7,000 clickers before the jump. The Germans figured out the system within 6 hours. By June 7th, German infantry were using captured clickers to ambush American paratroopers in the hedgerows. A single click in darkness. An American would respond with 2 clicks. German machine gun fire would follow. 14 paratroopers died this way in Hartwell's operational area alone. The radios were worse. The SCR 300 backpack radio weighed 38 pounds with batteries. Effective range, 3 miles under ideal conditions. The hedgerows reduced that to 400 yards. Most sets were damaged in the drop. Transmit for 30 seconds, and shells would arrive within 2 minutes. Hartwell had landed in Apple Orchard at 1:47 on June 6. Hard impact, his radio shattered. His map case tore open. 3 men from his stick found him by dawn. By the afternoon of June 6th, he had gathered 42 paratroopers from 6 different units. None of them were from his company. By June 7th, his group had grown to 96 men. No radios, no contact with battalion, no idea where the front lines were. The cricket clickers were compromised. Hand signals only worked in daylight, and moving in daylight meant German snipers. 340 men were scattered in his sector. They needed a signal system. Something the Germans couldn't replicate, something that could carry through hedgerows, something that wouldn't draw artillery. Hartwell had carried his harmonica through Sicily, through Italy, through 23 training jumps at Fort Benning. The operations staff told him to leave it behind. Too loud, too distinctive, too risky. He brought it anyway. Theodore Hartwell grew up in Grand Island, Nebraska. His father ran a hardware store. His mother taught piano. Hartwell learned harmonica at age 8. Because his hands were too small for piano keys. By age 12, he could play 200 songs from memory. By age 16, he was performing at county fairs across central Nebraska. He studied music education at the University of Nebraska, graduated in 1937, taught music at Grand Island Senior High School. He enlisted in December 1941, 26 years old, no military background, no ROTC, no family military tradition. The Army sent him to officer candidate school at Fort Benning, Georgia. He excelled in map reading and navigation. Failed the first physical fitness test. Passed the second by 2 points. Graduated in the middle of his class. Requested assignment to the airborne. The instructors told him he was too old for jump school. Too soft. Too academic. He graduated jump school 3rd in his class. Hartwell deployed to North Africa in 1943. His unit missed the Sicily jump due to training delays. He finally jumped into combat at Salerno in September 1943. Light resistance. His unit assembled within 2 hours. No casualties in his platoon. Italy taught him that textbook procedures worked when everything went according to plan. They fell apart when soldiers scattered across unfamiliar terrain in darkness. He started thinking about communication alternatives during winter quarters in 1944. The army was planning something big. Everyone knew it. The training intensity increased. New equipment arrived. New tactical problems emerged. Hartwell spent evening hours in his tent, experimenting with his harmonica, testing which notes carried farthest, which tones cut through wind, which sequences were easiest to remember under stress. He developed a system. Simple melodies. 4-note phrases. Each phrase meant something specific. Assembly point. Danger. All clear. Officer present. He taught the system to his platoon during March 1944. They practiced in English countryside. The men thought it was entertaining, a musical novelty, something to break the monotony of training. None of them believed they would actually use it. Hartwell packed the harmonica in his jump jacket on June 5th. Hona Marine Band, key of C10 holes, 4 inches long, 2 ounces. The operations officer saw it during pre-flight inspection, told him it violated operational security protocols, told him to leave it with personal effects. Hartwell put it back in his pocket. Every military communication manual since 1918 emphasized standardization, radio procedures, hand signals, wire communications, flares, visual markers, all precisely defined, all extensively trained. Music wasn't in any manual. Battalion Commander Colonel Robert Marsh told Hartwell that harmonicas were civilian instruments with no tactical application. The S3 operations officer, Major Dennis Kuhn, called it a carnival toy during the final briefing on June 4th. The training manuals issued by Combined Operations Headquarters stated that musical instruments were prohibited in combat drops due to weight restrictions and acoustic signature concerns. Every airborne officer who reviewed the D-Day plans believed that scattered units would reassemble using standard protocols: cricket clickers for immediate contact, radio nets for command and control, wire teams for stable communications, runners for backup. The 82nd Airborne had tested these procedures in Sicily. Success rate, 73% assembly within 12 hours. The 101st had refined the procedures in training. Their projected success rate, 82%. The plans assumed moderate casualties. They assumed some equipment loss. They assumed radio contact within 3 hours of landing. They didn't assume total dispersion across 50 miles. They didn't assume radios smashed in hard landings. They didn't assume the Germans would crack the cricket clicker system within 6 hours. Every assumption was wrong. What Hartwell understood that the planning staffs didn't was simple. Standardization created vulnerability. If Americans trained on one system, that system could be compromised. If everyone used the same signals, the enemy could exploit those signals. He needed something the Germans couldn't predict, couldn't triangulate, couldn't replicate. Music fit all 3 requirements. A harmonica produced complex waveforms that didn't behave like speech or mechanical signals. The notes dispersed differently through vegetation. The tone quality varied with breath pressure and technique in ways that were nearly impossible to fake without training. The Germans had excellent military bands. They understood music, but they didn't have American folk songs programmed into their tactical doctrine. If you want to see how Captain Hartwell used a 2-ounce harmonica to coordinate 340 men across 8 square miles of enemy territory, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Theodore Hartwell, crouching in a hedgerow at 3:20 on June 8th, holding a compass and wondering if his career was about to end in friendly fire or German machine gun bullets. Hartwell spent the daylight hours of June 7th analyzing the tactical problem. 340 men scattered across approximately 8 square miles. That created a density of 42 men per square mile. In hedgerow terrain, effective visual range was 20 to 50 feet. Effective calling range without compromising security, maybe 100 feet. The mathematics were brutal. If each soldier could clear a circle with a 100-foot radius in 1 hour that covered approximately 30 to 1,000 square feet, 1 square mile contained 27,878,400 square feet. At 100% efficiency, impossible in combat, it would take 375 man-hours to clear 1 square mile. To clear 8 square miles and find all scattered personnel, 3,000 man-hours. His current force, 96 men. Even running continuous patrols, full assembly would take 32 hours minimum. That assumed no German interference, no casualties, no rest, No security halts. The Germans held the villages. They controlled the roads. They had local knowledge. They had radios that worked. They were actively hunting scattered paratroopers. Standard doctrine said establish a defensive perimeter and wait for relief. Protect what you have. Don't risk more casualties trying to find scattered personnel. But 340 men represented two-thirds of his battalion's effective strength in this sector. Those men were combat veterans, trained specialists, machine gunners, mortar crews, radio operators, medics. The operation needed them. Hartwell needed a way to signal assembly without revealing specific positions. A broadcast method, something that would carry across hedgerow country, something Americans would recognize and Germans would dismiss or misinterpret. Sound carried strangely through hedgerows. Voices could travel 400 yards downwind but disappear at 50 yards across the wind. Gunfire echoed and bounced until directionality became meaningless. But music was different. Musical tones had specific frequencies. The human ear was trained to recognize melody patterns even through distortion and interference. American soldiers had grown up with certain songs: Yankee Doodle, Camptown Races, Oh, Susanna. Simple melodies that were instantly recognizable, even from four-note fragments. The Germans might hear the music, but they wouldn't necessarily recognize the tactical significance. A soldier playing music in the dark could be dismissed as psychological, the breakdown of discipline. They wouldn't expect it to be a precisely organized communication system. Hartwell tested his theory at sunset on June 7th. He positioned his 96 men in a defensive perimeter around a farmhouse 2 miles south of Sainte-Mère-Église. German patrols were active. Artillery fell randomly every 30 to... The tactical situation was stable but precarious. At 21:15, Hartwell climbed onto the farmhouse roof, alone, no weapon, just the harmonica and a watch. He played 4 notes. The opening phrase of Yankee Doodle. He waited 30 seconds. He played it again. Same 4 notes, same rhythm. Within 5 minutes he heard responses. Not music, movement. Rustling in the hedgerows to the east. His men reported contact, not German. American voices, recognition codes exchanged. 11 paratroopers emerged from the hedgerows, scattered from different units. They had been hiding 400 yards away for 36 hours. They heard the harmonica, recognized the tune, realized it wasn't random. One of them, Private First Class Raymond Ochoa, from the 502nd Regiment, said he heard German voices reacting to the music. The Germans laughed. They said something in German that Ochoa didn't understand. They didn't investigate. Hartwell ran the test again at 22:30. Different song. Oh, Susanna. Same 4-note pattern. 7 more men appeared within 20 minutes. The system worked because it exploited cultural knowledge. Every American soldier had heard these songs dozens of times. Most had sung them in school. The melodies were embedded in childhood memory. 4 notes were enough to trigger recognition. The Germans heard music. Their doctrine had no category for tactical music signals. Their training prepared them for radio intercepts, visual signals, flares and runners. Music didn't fit any threat profile. It was simultaneously obvious and invisible. Hartwell spent the night of June 7th refining the system. He created a vocabulary. 8 songs, each with a specific meaning. Yankee Doodle. American position safe to approach. Oh, Susanna. Officer present. Leadership assembly. Camptown Races. Danger. Germans nearby. Stay hidden. Battle hymn of the Republic. All clear. Reser movement. When Johnny comes marching home. Medical assistance needed. Dixie. Enemy contact. Combat imminent. My country 'tis of thee. Mission accomplished. General Assembly. America the Beautiful. Withdraw. Fallback position. Simple. Memorable. Culturally specific. By 3 o'clock on June 8, Hartwell was ready to broadcast across the entire sector. At 3:20 on June 8, Hartwell climbed a stone wall on the eastern edge of his perimeter. The night was clear. Temperature approximately 52 degrees. Wind from the northwest at 8 to 10 miles per hour. Visibility maybe 30 feet in the darkness. He played Yankee Doodle. Full melody. 16 bars. Slow tempo. Each note held for full value. The sound carried across the hedgerows. Dispersed. Echoed. Faded into the darkness. He waited 3 minutes. No response. No movement. He played again. Same melody. Same tempo. At 3:28, he heard something. Movement in the hedgerow 200 yards north. He couldn't see anything. His perimeter guards reported no contact. Then a voice. American accent. Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Calling recognition codes. Two paratroopers from the 507th Regiment. They had been moving south, trying to find American lines. They heard the harmonica, recognized the tune. Took 15 minutes to cautiously approach the perimeter. Current total, 109 men. Hartwell waited until 4 o'clock. First light was coming. He needed to maximize the pre-dawn darkness window. At 4 o'clock, he played "O Susanna," Officer Assembly Call. This time, the response was faster. 6 minutes. A lieutenant from the 506th appeared from the western hedgerows. He had 23 men. They had been operating independently since the drop. The Lieutenant James Korsakov from Pennsylvania reported contact with German patrols the previous afternoon. No casualties. His group had radio equipment but no working sets. Current total, 132 men. Hartwell explained the system to Korsakov. The song meanings. The broadcast schedule. Korsakov's men spread into the perimeter. Security improved with more personnel. At 4:45, Hartwell played Battle Hymn of the Republic. All clear signal. Resume movement. The response came from multiple directions. This was dangerous. Multiple groups moving simultaneously toward one position. Risk of friendly fire. Risk of compromise. But they needed consolidation more than they needed perfect security. Over the next 30 minutes, 41 paratroopers emerged from hedgerows within a half-mile radius. Some came individually, some in pairs. One group of 7 men appeared together, including a captain from the 502nd Regiment. Current total, 173 men. Dawn came at 5:47. Hartwell stopped the broadcasts. Daylight meant German observation. The tactical situation changed. The German response came at 7:50. Artillery, 6 rounds, 105 mm. Impact 200 yards south of Hartwell's position. The shells fell in a pattern that suggested the Germans were searching, not targeting. They knew Americans were in the area. They didn't know exactly where. Hartwell held position through the morning. No broadcasts, no movement. Silent security. The Germans probed with infantry at 9. A patrol of approximately 12 men moved through the hedgerows 400 yards east. Hartwell's security team spotted them. No engagement. The Germans passed without detecting the American position. At 11:15, Hartwell received his first communication from higher headquarters, a runner from battalion. The 506th was concentrating forces for an attack on the village of Saint-Côme-du-Mont. All scattered units were ordered to consolidate and move to assembly areas. Hartwell had 173 men. Battalion was expecting maybe 50 from his sector. The runner provided coordinates for the assembly area, 4 miles southeast. Movement after dark. Hartwell knew there were more men scattered in the hedgerows. He had one more night to find them before the battalion moved on the attack. At 21 o'clock on June 8th, full darkness returned. Hartwell resumed broadcasts. Yankee Doodle at 21 o'clock. Response within 8 minutes. 14 men from the 508th Regiment. They had been observing Hartwell's position since afternoon, waiting for darkness to approach. Current total, 187 men. "O Susanna," at 21:30. Response from 2 directions. A lieutenant with 18 men from the north. A staff sergeant with 9 men. Current total, 214 men. The German response came at 22:05. Machine gun fire. From the south, approximately 600 yards distant. The fire wasn't directed at Hartwell's position. It was searching fire. Random bursts into hedgerows. The Germans had heard something. They were responding. But they didn't have a target. Hartwell waited 30 minutes. The German fire stopped at 22:37. At 23 o'clock, he played countdown races. Danger signal. Stay hidden. No movement. No response. His men held position. Anyone listening would recognize the warning. At 23:45, the Germans fired flares. Illumination rounds. They burst over the hedgerows 200 yards south. White light flooded the landscape for 30 seconds. Hartwell's position was outside the illumination radius. The Germans were searching the wrong area. Hartwell waited until 0:30 on June 9th. The German activity had stopped. No flares for 45 minutes. No machine gun fire. He played Battle Hymn of the Republic. All clear. The response was immediate. The men had been waiting in the hedgerows, listening, ready to move when the signal came. Over the next hour, 96 paratroopers emerged from the darkness. They came in groups, Some had been within 200 yards of Hartwell's position for 12 hours, waiting, watching, listening for the signal. One group of 32 men was led by Major Frank Griffin from the 502nd Regiment. Griffin was senior to Hartwell. He assumed command immediately. But he endorsed Hartwell's system. The harmonica had worked. It had gathered more men than any standard assembly procedure could have achieved in the same time frame. Current total, 310 men. At 1:45 on June 9th, Hartwell played his final broadcast. "My country, 'tis of thee." Mission accomplished. General Assembly. 15 minutes later, the last group appeared. 24 men from the 506th. One of them was Hartwell's company commander, Captain Louis DeMarco. DeMarco had been searching for his scattered company for 3 days. DeMarco asked Hartwell how he had assembled 334 men in 48 hours. Hartwell showed him the harmonica. Current total, 334 men. At 3 o'clock on June 9th, the consolidated force began movement toward the battalion assembly area. 4 miles, moving through hedgerow country, avoiding German positions, stopping every 30 minutes for security halts. During the movement, 6 more stragglers joined the column, men who had heard the harmonica signals the previous night but couldn't reach the assembly point in time. Final total, 340 men. The column reached battalion lines at 8:15 on June 9th. Major Griffin reported to the battalion commander. 340 men from sectors that were expected to yield maybe 80. Colonel Marsh asked Griffin how he had accomplished the assembly. Griffin pointed to Hartwell. Marsh asked Hartwell to explain. Hartwell pulled out the harmonica. Marsh looked at it, looked at Hartwell, looked at the 340 paratroopers standing in formation. He told Hartwell to keep the harmonica, ordered him to teach the system to the entire regiment. The Germans called it die singende Wahnsinn, the singing madness. Intelligence reports from captured German documents mentioned it specifically. The Germans heard American soldiers playing music in the hedgerows during June 8th and 9th. They interpreted it as psychological breakdown, stress reaction, the collapse of unit discipline. They never realized it was a tactical communication system. The consolidated force attacked Saint-Côme-du-Mont on June 10th. 340 men from Hartwell's sector joined 860 additional paratroopers from other assembly areas. Total assault force, 1,200 men. The Germans defended the village with approximately 400 infantry and multiple artillery positions. The battle lasted 9 hours. Hartwell led his assembled men in the assault. The unit cohesion was remarkable. Men from 6 different regiments fought together as if they had trained as a single unit. The assembly process had created bonds. Hartwell's harmonica system had given them confidence in unconventional methods. The village fell at 17:30 on June 10th. American casualties, 47 killed, 132 wounded. German casualties, approximately 220 killed or captured. Unknown wounded. Of the 340 men Hartwell assembled using the harmonica signals, 31 became casualties in the assault. 22% casualty rate, below the average for the engagement. The tactical contribution was significant but not dramatic. The men would have reached American lines eventually through standard evasion procedures. Some would have been captured, some would have been killed by German patrols, most would have survived. But timing mattered. The attack on Saint-Côme-du-Mont required concentration of forces. The battalion needed those 340 men on June 10th, not June 12th, not June 15th, June 10th. Hartwell's harmonica delivered them on time. That night, Major Griffin submitted Hartwell for the Silver Star. The citation mentioned innovative tactical communication methods that resulted in the assembly of scattered personnel under combat conditions. The citation didn't mention the harmonica specifically. Colonel Marsh filed a detailed after-action report describing the harmonica system. He recommended further development of musical signal methods for airborne operations. The report went to division headquarters, then to corps headquarters, then to combined operations staff in England. Someone in the bureaucracy decided that musical signals were too unconventional for formal doctrine. The technique was noted, praised, filed away. No official training materials were developed, no field manuals were updated. The harmonica system remained an interesting footnote in one battalion's operational history, but the paratroopers remembered. For the rest of the Normandy campaign, scattered American soldiers used musical signals to identify themselves. Not systematically, not by doctrine, by informal cultural transmission. Soldier to soldier, story to story, the Germans never adapted. They continued to interpret American music in the hedgerows as psychological breakdown. Their intelligence reports from June 1944 describe widespread American morale collapse based on acoustic evidence. They were listening to the singing madness. They had no idea it was winning the fight for the hedgerows. The 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment fought through Normandy until late July. Hartwell commanded his company through the campaign. He kept the harmonica, used it 3 more times for local assemblies, never with the same dramatic effect as June 8th and 9th. The regiment returned to England in August for rest and refit. Hartwell received his Silver Star in a ceremony at the base camp. The division commander pinned the medal, made brief remarks about innovative leadership, moved on to the next recipient. 15 men received decorations that day. Hartwell's was the only one that mentioned communication methods. The Normandy operation validated airborne tactics but exposed serious weaknesses. The after-action reviews focused on drop accuracy, equipment survivability, and radio reliability. Musical signals received 2 paragraphs in a 300-page report. Hartwell jumped into Holland during Operation Market Garden in September 1944. Standard assembly procedures. Cricket clickers had been replaced by improved recognition systems. The drop was more accurate. Radio nets functioned better. Assembly rates improved to 87% within 6 hours. The harmonica wasn't needed. Hartwell survived Holland. He jumped into Germany during Operation Varsity in March 1945, the last major airborne operation in Europe. The drop was executed with near-perfect precision. Overwhelming Allied air superiority, minimal German resistance. The war in Europe ended in May. Hartwell rotated back to the United States in July 1945. He was assigned to training duties at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He separated from active service in November 1945 with the rank of major. He kept the harmonica. He never played it again in military service. Theodore Hartwell returned to Grand Island, Nebraska, in December 1945. He resumed his position at Grand Island Senior High School, music teacher. Same job he left in 1942, same classroom. Same piano. He married Dorothy Fletcher in June 1946. She taught English. At the same school, they had 3 children, 2 daughters. Hartwell taught music for 36 years. He directed the school band, organized Christmas concerts, taught basic music theory to students who would rather be anywhere else. His colleagues knew he had served in the war, knew he was a paratrooper, knew he had jumped on D-Day. He never elaborated. When students asked about the war, he would offer brief, factual answers. I was in France, then Holland, then Germany, then I came home. He never mentioned the harmonica system, never told the story of assembling 340 men through hedgerows. The Silver Star citation hung in a frame in his home office. His children knew it existed. They never knew the details. Dorothy knew some of the story. Hartwell mentioned it once, in 1953, during a conversation about communication and music. He told her that music saved lives in Normandy. He didn't explain further. She didn't press. Hartwell retired from teaching in 1981. He spent retirement playing harmonica at community events, county fairs, the same circuit he played before the war. He was known locally as the Harmonica Man. No one connected him to D-Day. He died on March 14, 1989. Heart failure, age 74. His obituary in the Grand Island Independent ran 6 sentences. Theodore Hartwell, retired music teacher at Grand Island Senior High School, died Tuesday at home. He was 74. He served in World War II. He is survived by his wife, Dorothy, 3 children, and 7 grandchildren. Services Friday at First Methodist Church. Memorials to the school music program. The obituary never mentioned the 82nd Airborne, never mentioned Normandy, never mentioned his Silver Star, never mentioned that music was his weapon. The harmonica system disappeared into obscurity after the war. The detailed after-action reports remained classified until 1968. When they were declassified, no historian noticed the 2 paragraphs about musical signals. The documents were filed at the National Archives. They gathered dust. The story survived through oral tradition. Veterans of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment told it at reunions. The details became distorted. Some versions claimed Hartwell assembled 500 men. Some said he used a trumpet. Some said the Germans specifically hunted for the musician. The core truth remained. An officer used music to gather scattered soldiers behind enemy lines. In 2006, a graduate student at the University of Nebraska researched local World War II veterans for a thesis project. She interviewed Dorothy Hartwell, then 91 years old. Dorothy mentioned that her husband had used music in the war. The student pursued the lead, found the after-action reports, found Griffin's Silver Star recommendation, found the German intelligence documents that mentioned Die Singende Wahnsinn. The thesis was completed in 2007. It received modest academic attention. A small article appeared in World War II magazine in 2009. The story began circulating among military historians specializing in unconventional tactics. The Harmonica system became a case study in cultural exploitation in warfare, using enemy assumptions against them, hiding tactical communications in plain. Modern military communication doctrine includes extensive electronic warfare section, frequency hopping, satellite links, digital networks. None of it mentions music, but the principle remains valid. Effective tactical communication requires methods the enemy cannot easily compromise. Sometimes the best communication is the one that doesn't look like communication at all. Hartwell understood that in 1944. He proved it in Normandy hedgerows with a 2-ounce harmonica and 340 scattered paratroopers who needed a way home. 340 paratroopers scattered across 8 square miles of German-occupied Normandy. One captain with a harmonica and the courage to trust his unconventional insight. The Germans called it the singing madness. They heard music in the darkness and interpreted it as the collapse of American morale. They were listening to innovation winning the battle. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button right now. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Every like helps rescue another forgotten story from silence. Every like keeps Theodore Hartwell's memory alive. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every day. Stories about soldiers who prove themselves with skill and ingenuity. Real people, real heroism, real innovation born from desperate circumstances. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Germany, France, the Netherlands? Our community stretches across the entire world. Veterans and history enthusiasts from dozens of countries. People who believe these stories matter. People who understand that heroism takes many forms. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served in World War II. Tell us if you play an instrument. Tell us if you learned something new today. Tell us if you've ever heard of musical signals in military history. Just let us know you're here. Theodore Hartwell returned to Nebraska, taught music for 36 years, played harmonica at county fairs, and died with a 6-sentence obituary that never mentioned his finest hour. But you're watching this video. You know the story now. You're part of making sure it doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered. Not just the generals, not just the Medal of Honor recipients, the captains, the lieutenants, the soldiers who improvised and adapted and saved lives through innovation. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for keeping the singing madness alive.